It is a huge honor to be here with Kristine and Jared and Bruce. All three of you have built successful companies. You've been inside companies that have experienced rapid growth. So maybe building on those introductions from Erica, we'll start with you, Kristine. Just talk a little bit about Allocadia. First of all, congratulations, by the way, on an absolutely amazing exit and such a wonderful company that you built. It must feel a little weird now to be outside of the company that you created, but maybe you can talk a little bit about Allocadia and your growth that you experienced there, and just, yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Keith, and hello, everyone. But yeah, definitely a little bit odd to be in a zone where I've transitioned from the business that I co-founded, but timely in that this subject is all about business development and scale and growth. We really did that transaction to get that next inflection point of scale and growth, to broaden the platform and the suite, to broaden our geographic reach, and to really take the company to that next stage. So yeah, today, as Erica mentioned, it's around 350 people around the world, and we grew it to around 150 people, largely through being sort of a cash positive, operationally efficient business with really high gross retention metrics and net retention, which of course we'll talk a bit more in terms of strategies on net new sales, et cetera, and customer growth. But yeah, just happy to share any type of stories to help out people on the phone if you're in those phases of growing.
Yeah, we're definitely going to unpack in this call, in this session, profitable growth.
Yeah,
because we're facing into a period now where that's the expectation, is that companies are not just growing, but they're growing profitably. So how about yourself, Jared? You've worked at Ping Identity, huge rapid growth. You've been at Tableau, and now you're at JNAP, which is just an awesome company and a wonderful product. What's your growth story?
Yeah, I'll focus on Jane. It was interesting. I was reading some of the original growth plan that Trevor, our CEO, had written back in 2012 when he first founded the company. And the big North Star goal was to grow to 1,000 clinics using the product by 2021. And we're at 26,000 now. So pretty cool to see just the way that growth has happened, operating purely in a cash positive way. So even though that was not popular amongst investors and it wasn't in vogue, Ali and Trevor really held to that, and through that have maybe not grown as fast as they could if they were in burn mode. But what that's resulted in is our relationship with our customers. We've been able to keep up with the growth in a way that we can provide premium customer service through that growth. And I think that's become our reputation and our brand.
Absolutely. And Bruce, you've been in Appnovation, which is just this incredible services business that was built up, and now you're in Launchpad. How do you look at growth from your perspective?
Right. I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Really honored to be here on this panel. I think when I talk about growth, it means a couple of things. One is obviously the business growth itself, and we have been very fortunate to, I think Erica mentioned about the infamous $500. That's our seed funding for Launchpad. It was very intentional. When we started Launchpad in 2018, we really wanted to make a point about a healthy, profit-oriented, cash-positive growth. Without the venture fundings that's really out there, as Jared said, it's not in vogue. But with the focus on that type of a healthy business fundamentals growth, that allows us to really chart our own course. And also, second piece to that growth is really about our people. I've been in high growth situations where every week there's 3 or 4 new hires that's added to the company. very quickly you realize that you have a really good team and good people, but along the way, certain venture-driven behaviors would allow you to lose that team and that cohesion and the culture. So when it comes to growth, even though Launchpad since 2018, we've gone from 1 employee now to 60, and from the $500 to 10 million in sales revenue. We have not lost that growth mentality and the spirit of our people first culture, and I think that's really a testament to what it means to all of us here for growth.
And Bruce, you have a lot of you have infinite choice where you're going to focus your business. You can develop new products, you can improve the product that you have, you can explore new markets. How do you and the team at Launchpad prioritize? How do you pick where you're going to spend your time and where you're going to spend your energy?
That's a really good question, Keith. And I think everyone on the call here would agree that it's probably one of the key questions for anyone who's really scaling the business. First of all, for Launchpad, what we do is that we put puzzle pieces together for any business on the integration, tying all the different applications together for our clients and our partners. So with that, it means that we could do integration and automation in any given market industry vertical. So that in itself presents a challenge where do you focus? And aside from the industry vertical, but there's also geographical markets that we look at because it is global. So there's two guiding principles that we have chosen. One, from the geo market perspective, one of the experiences I've had in the previous kind of growth company before Launchpad is, I have been kind of tasked in growing our EMEA region in the previous companies and setting up business operations from the ground up, greenfield, and also M&A in EMEA regions, while our North American core market has not been saturated and have not been maximized. And that in itself, lesson learned from there was, I was always asked the question by our new hires and the teams and partners in the EMEA region, so why are you here? Why is the company doing business here? The question is always being asked internally now that, are we doing the business expansion for the sake of expansion, or is serving a strategic purpose? Secondly, I think the lesson learned around the choices of our verticalization is almost kind of, intentionally putting a bit of a blinder up so that you can stay focused, really staying focused on the highest ROIs and where you have had historical wins. So putting our choices on the focus of the limited resources, especially if you're running a company that is at the growth stage, and not running into the burn behavior, right? As a cash positive behavior that we're driving. So you're working with very limited resources. So choosing where your wins historically have been, and that the target market, the total addressable market, is where it's going to bring you the most ROI. That's the key, and really, really making a fist, kind of concentrating your limited forces and resources and making a punch rather than spreading yourself too thin. I think just lesson learned for myself over the past number of years building organizations and offerings in the market. It's so easy to go score on this. I'm sure Kristine and Jared would probably share similar thoughts on this.
Well, I know I do. I mean, at Galvanize, we were a global business. We actually, when we joined the company, was already global, and so making sure that there was enough wood behind the arrow anywhere we went in the world, so that we were actually fully committed and invested. We used to joke that there's how much business is there in the New York metropolitan area in the U.S. California is one of the world's largest economies. Like, why are we somewhere else when the U.S. is such a huge market? So that's something definitely we thought about. For yourself, Kristine, at Allocadia, did you want to be global right away? Were you opportunistic, or were you very strategic in how you picked the markets that you went into?
Yeah, I mean, how I think about, how we prioritize growth is in a couple buckets of, first, this big baseline of customers and ensuring you're delivering that value and gross retention as sort of a key baseline, right? If you've got that gross retention that is not in a healthy environment, around 80%, et cetera, I mean, you're having to grow by 20% on net new or through some expand to then actually get, to 0.0 to actually grow your total ARR. So, and I'm talking a lot enterprise SaaS, these things definitely flow over to consumer SaaS. So this is like, especially if you're starting off your company, like customer value, gross retention, and then net retention, of course. So if you have net retention around 115%, you're already growing 15% every year, plus then you add on your net new. And so I think with Allocadia, we've always been just extremely good at providing that value to customers, growing and expanding those customers, especially if you're an enterprise SaaS. And then scaling net new, I think, Keith, I know we talked about some of the challenging parts. This was difficult over the years to really figure out how to scale our net new sales team. But we were focused on those exercises in our core town. Like Bruce, you were explaining, where can we focus? It was mostly North American geo. And then it was only up until this last transaction that we really thought about the strategy to scale into new geos and to really expand our product platform. So these were later things for us. And we chose to do that in a really big way versus investing in it sort of organically. We chose to do that through partnering with a big PE firm who put money on the balance sheet. We were insta growth from a new merging with a company to do that. So I just come back to baseline. If you don't have that in place on customers, then you're going to have a really difficult time just getting ahead on any type of growth. And I've seen it happen a lot where companies get stuck in that.
Yeah, and Jared, you live in the product world. Like your job is to make sure that the customers love what Jane is bringing to market. And then, of course, you've always got the pressures as well. Like what's next, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to improve the product platform? Are you going to bring in new offerings? So when you look at growth and new markets and new product offerings, what, how do you think about, how do you and the team at Jane think about where you're going to focus your time and your team's effort?
Yeah, we're, I guess to build on what Kristine said, we part of our sales strategy is actually to talk people out of using our product. So we really try to identify whether or not we can provide them with an excellent experience if they're using our product and we can meet the needs that they're needing. That doesn't mean we don't have customers that just bypass us and just sign up, but anyone that's asking for like a demo and an interaction with us, we will try to ask them a lot about their business and try to get that perfect fit or as close to perfect as possible. So that our NPS score is about 80 right now, which is pretty impressive. Good. And so that's not by accident. Our approach has been very much delighting our customers and really taking care of them. We actually, one of the sayings that we have is we look for Jane to be the most valuable employee of the month every month. So, we're a partner with the business and helping them be successful. And so when we start to go into new markets, it's usually because some of those early adopters who have chosen, you're saying this and that's missing, but we don't care. We like the product. We're going to use it anyway. We start to see some momentum build there. And when that starts to become a bigger volume, then that gives us some signal that we should probably go after that market and start to add some additional capabilities to take care of them. A great example during the pandemic is we saw the mental health profession went from very traditional pen and paper business to needing to be electronic. And they just started adopting our product, but we were missing some key core capabilities there. And so as we saw that volume start to increase, we felt like that became a strategic investment that the market was telling us that they needed.
So it started out sort of opportunistic. You were seeing what was happening in the market, but then you applied good product management
right.
process and technique to that. Is that how it sort of emerged at Jay?
Yeah. We saw the not just a onesie twosie, but some real volume building there, and then we went after that in partnership with those early adopters.
Yeah. So what I really take away from that is obviously, listen to your customers, really look at what their needs are. I mean, an NPS that high is very impressive. So congratulations on maintaining that. That's not easy to do. Bruce, I like, nobody does this alone. Like your company focuses on bringing, different companies together through integrations. Like this is like, there's what you're doing inside your company, but there's also those partners that you're working with as well to build your business. I'm really curious about Launchpad and how do you work with partners? How do you help them? How do they help you? What's your partnership experience been like?
Right. And I would say without partnership strategy from, day minus 360 before Launchpad was created, we would not have been able to grow. From literally day one, we already had a partnership strategy or a direction in place, and then formulating the proper strategy and program to start. Some of the data that we've been looking at is from our year one in 2018 when we were starting. About I would say 80% of our year one revenue was partner generated.
Wow.
It was that high. And over time, of course, that comes down a little bit. So we are now at about 40% or so. That's partner generated, lead gen coming from partner. I would say a partnership from, as you mentioned, Keith, we're in a unique position. Our offering is all about integrating different systems. So we have a couple of different types of partners. One is product partnership. So for instance, Jane app or, Workday or Salesforce, the different CRMs that's out there, the different ERPs that's out there. When in a product line that is trying to expand and grow and find more stickiness into their end clients organizations, that integration is needed. So oftentimes their sales pipeline are blocked up because the customer wants to buy Jane app. I'm using Jane since Jerry, you're just talking, and they say, can Jane work with Sage or work with our Workday, our Bamboo, or whatever they may be. The answer, if it's no, the deal is stuck. So this is where we come in to unblock that sales opportunity and really clean up that clog in the sales pipeline. That's one type of partnership. And we find that, we handle those type in a very strategic manner because that's absolutely, B2B. That's the product to product conversation. Another type of partnership that we often come into contact with is, more, I would say, on the implementation services type. So, Deloitte or Traction, service-oriented consulting firms, the big, SIs. They're running into organizing or creating an architecture, right? So that's the type of partnership that we're getting brought in to organize the architecture and be in the platform. So that having said, I would say, from a go-to-market strategy, we have a dedicated partnership program that's tailored for both. And also some of the lessons learned there. Oftentimes, organizations want to just put logos of partners on there, right? And
the vanity thing, it's not real.
The vanity thing, right? Once again, just like the geo expansion, is like I'm checking a box. I got an office in London. Wow, that looks great. You look big. But from a partnership perspective, we actually internally have this checklist whether this thing falls into what we call institutional partnership. It falls into the institutional partnership. It's just a logo. You're talking to them once a quarter, right? Nothing really happens. Where the real partnership happens is that you're supporting each other in a strategic manner. For instance, one of our new partner, ChargeBee, they do subscription billing. So by bringing us on, they went from 1.4 billion in valuation last year in 2021 now within a year to 3.5 billion. I'm not saying that's all because of us, but partly is unblocking a huge amount of their revenue, right? So yeah, back to you, Keith. Hopefully that.
Yeah, well, I believe it's all because of you. So just to be I mean, I think that's an important point, though. And Kristine, I'm going to ask you this because I feel like companies go into partnerships a lot, and they're like, well, what can we get out of this partner? Like, what can we, like, what are they going to do for us? Where I think partnerships that are the most successful are the ones where people enter in and say, well, like, what can we do for them? How's that going to make their business stronger? And because of that, an outcome is going to be that our business is going to grow. So from the Allocadia experience of partnerships, maybe take us through the history. Like, what partners worked well? What did you learn? Were there any sort of hard lessons, wrong turns along the way? What was it like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, a partner strategy has been like critical to Allocadia's success. So we always had our partner lens from day one. That was a bit of my history and career too. So I know I could pick up the phone when we were 3 people and go talk to big players in our space. And they helped elevate our brand on the go-to-market side with technology integrations, et cetera. And then also for strategic relationships. So I still bucket these into a bit of, like I was saying, on focusing on your growth strategies, which is, what is it going to do to deliver customer value? Okay, there's some that, like Bruce was talking about, there's integrations and use cases that your customers in SaaS are just going to want and need. You can never, I think, in today's world, be sort of a standalone SaaS offering. It's your job as a vendor to connect in. So whether you're using partners like Bruce, we had a lot of iPaaS partners that we could connect into ERP, into CRM, into all of the digital marketing solutions that our customers needed. Then I look at the second pillar. So in a way, Keith, it's like, yeah, what can we do for the customer with our partner strategy? Right.
That's even a better way to put it.
Yeah, totally.
Together, do for the customer.
Totally. Exactly. Together for the customer. And then I look at just go-to-market strategy, right? Based on those joint solutions, how can you go to market together with partners to actually scale and grow your business and acquire new customers, et cetera? I sort of look at services partners as a separate sort of beast, but when I think about kind of scale partners, and that can scale services for sure. But I do think about go-to-market partners. Like we had big partnerships with Marketo, Adobe, IBM Marketing Cloud, Oracle Marketing Cloud. And this was a source of our revenue. I think around like 10 to 15% of revenue was tagged being sourced or in partnership. And a lot more was influenced from those partners, right? Because of the joint solutions. And then, of course, the third piece would be strategic outcomes. We're all in the world of tech. We all get, this is especially when you come into VC and PE, of course, a whole goal here is to grow and get more customers and bigger teams and career opportunities, et cetera. But sometimes you do that via and with a strategic partner through an outcome, sort of similar to what Allocadia did, right? If you find that partner that actually has the joint customer value, Keith, like is that sort of that anchor, then maybe it does make sense for you to go and scale, inside of a bigger portfolio.
There are relationships that are worth your time.
Yeah.
And there are those that are not. So in your experience, Kristine, what were the ones that were really worth your time?
Yeah. And that's the tricky part, right? On the go-to-market side. Like, I think it should be a focus of your time as CEO, but I like this idea, Bruce, of what you were saying too, and picking those partners and having a criteria list, because you can easily get distracted, especially at an earlier stage on partner strategy. You have to be so diligent around who you choose to work with, how much investment you put in to that partner, and then measure those outcomes. And this is where it can get difficult, because sometimes it can be strategic outcomes and ecosystem, yet you might not be driving the hard kind of direct line source of net new revenue, but you still want to invest in that partner. So I think that's where it's just strategic alignment with your executive team on what's too much, what's too little, and just constantly evaluating that and finding that fine line. And sometimes we got it really right, and sometimes we got it really wrong. We had some partnerships where we probably spent too much time on it, with the sort of idea or promise that it might mean more than it was. But just like startups, these big enterprise, the big leading companies, their strategies change too and shift, and you've sort of got to, move with that, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I think about is, if you don't know what the incentive program is of your partner's sales team, you're screwed. Like, you need to know what they actually are being incented to do, because if they're incented to go in one direction and you're working in another with them, forget about it. It's not going to work out. Like, you're not ever going to be in alignment. Jared, in your experience, like, how much does Jane work with partners? Is there certain partners that are really high value versus others? Like, what's your world like around the partnership side?
Yeah, I guess I think of it in a couple of ways. One being general capabilities that we need that we could maybe get a full-fledged feature. So think of payments, for example, with working with Stripe, where there's a rev share opportunity. You're going to get money out of it. You don't have to employ a team of 30 or 50 plus people to go build that thing. And you can provide value to customer almost overnight.
Right.
So there's that kind of piece. The other side, and this is a little bit more from my time at Tableau and Salesforce, but I mean, anybody that's worked with Salesforce, there's a billion different plugins you can get for it. Many companies have built their business on top of Salesforce, and to serve some really niche part of the market that Salesforce proper is never going to go build that special thing for the farmer that does something with crop measurements or something. Right. But if you can provide a platform with a strong API strategy and a way that other people can build their business on top of your business to address that niche market, that's a win-win both for the customer and for these people that maybe don't have the funds or the ability to go start a business from scratch, but they can do it on top of yours. And that's a win-win all around. And then the third thing that kind of came to mind that was a big part of my journey at Tableau as well as here at Jane is ambassadors. So these are people that just love your product and are willing to go out there and be evangelists for your product, even though they don't work for you. But if you can promote them and provide opportunities for them through speaking or certifications and different things like that, they can become really a marketing force out there for you.
Yeah, at Galvanize, one of our core vision was to make our customers the most sought after. So like, we worked in the governance risk compliance space, right? So the people that bought our software and used it, when they got in the elevator with the CEO was trying to get out of the elevator as soon as possible. This is the audit, this is the compliance people. And so we wanted to make them people that were able to have a strategic conversation, to be able to bring a real value to the business. And so that really resonates with me. And IP partners, like you said, are just as important. Like we would always think about, like, we want to write the least number of lines of code inside the building that are not specific to our domain. Like, if we could use Amazon, if we could use IP partners, as long as it was cost effective, we wanted to use those so that we could accelerate what we were offering our customers. Let's talk a little bit about team. So I know from the Galvanize experience that there were certain points where we put different types of teams in place, and then it was like growth just like unlocked. So I'm curious, Bruce, starting with you, like from the Launchpad and your past experience, what were some of the team composition changes where you put in place a team, or you changed the dynamics of a team, and then all of a sudden you're unlocking new growth that you just maybe perhaps weren't expecting it to go so quickly?
Right, and that's a great point, because I think the way that we have been looking at the team composition is absolutely led by our strategy and focus. And it has to, because we have just entered a strategic phase 3 in Launchpad's history, now that we're in 4 years. Phase 1 was to set up, right? In the early days, you required a team to really kind of set the tone, the culture, about initial customer acquisition. I'm sure, Kristine, as you're in the early days of co-funding, right, what you're focused on is getting that traction. So the type of team that you're putting together is about someone who who's able to really kind of roll up the sleeve. But that should never change, that part, and jump in there and having a bit of a grit. So that profile's defining that initial getting things off the ground. And then phase 2 was proving the revenue, which we ended in our last fiscal year, in our year 3 and 4. So that required a slightly different team. This is more pertaining to, Keith, what you're describing, putting the right people in there. Now you're gear shifting from gear 1 to gear 2 and 3. So that requires people who are process oriented, who have been there, done that, and also at the management level, who, we subscribe to the Vern's scaling up and Rockefeller habits. So that's the framework that we use. A very healthy, well-aligned executive team who actually like each other and like working with each other, can have what I call a dynamic tension in the boardroom, and being able to kind of challenge each other and be factual and data driven about those decisions that we make. Because it's that 1 and 60 rule in pilot school, right? You have 1 degree change in your course, and for every 60 miles that you're off by a number of miles there. So you're constantly changing. So having that right team in place, and we're looking for people who are in that phase. But we're in phase 3 now, shifting gears into our scalability phase of the strategic growth at Launchpad now, starting last October, and that team has changed. So we have put in a new head of sales who is more process driven, who is more scalability driven when it comes to our tools and data, and also our customer acquisition. So that team, I think, again, driven by our strategy, guided by what the direction that we're headed to. But at the core of it, we're a people company. That's never changing. Taking care of our people, investing in our people, reinvesting our profit in our people and our partners. I think that should never deviate.
Yeah, it's at different stages of a company's journey. There's going to be focus. People are carrying more responsibility, then they're more focused. Their role narrows, but in a bigger landscape. Kristine, from your perspective, what were some of the team changes that you made at Allocadia where you were like, oh, I wish we would have done that earlier? Like that was something that we should, if we did it a year ago, we would have benefited. I'm just super curious on that kind of inflection point where you're like, oh yeah, okay, that helped. That really helped the business.
Yeah, that's great, Keith. I'll answer that a bit more sort of, let's call it functionally, operationally, but yeah, the baseline to me on that team and people side, a bit of what Bruce was saying, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Lori Schultz, CEO of Galvanize, who was, of course, your CEO and on our board, who was just such an amazing leader on just investing in your team and your culture and your people as the baseline for growth. Like, this was priority number 1, was making sure, she talks about creating a culture of belief in the company of what's even possible, right? So you sort of have to assess where you are from just a culture standpoint too, and your team's readiness to then invest in new teams or different programs to grow. So I would say team culture first, right? That customer value and what you're doing second, and making sure that you have all those retention and net retention. And then you're into, okay, what are some moves I can make with my team in terms of scaling our growth as we move forward? And of course, for us, so this is the more functional piece, I guess, Keith, is net new sales. So Bruce, you just talked about being in that stage of bringing in a more process-oriented VP of sales. And I cannot emphasize enough to this group on the phone here, just how important it is to keep your eye on that and understand that. Understand the type of sales leader that you need, understand the type of sales reps you need, understand your modeling around sales rep productivity and ramp time and what's working and what isn't. Like that, it's so easy to say, we're going to scale our sales team. Great. Hire 10 people. It's never that easy on the sales side. Okay. It's all about execution. And I will tell you on that piece for sure, like on the customer value piece, I feel like, Jared, you were talking about that, like learning and delighting your customers. Like that is so unique to your own industry, right? You guys know your customers best. On the sales side, I feel like there are some more kind of proven, repeatable processes across different companies that you can look to employ at different stages of your growth. And it's just, quite frankly, the super hard part. And I feel like we didn't always nail that. We had some false starts. And I think it just slowed our growth. Although we weren't doing really good, right? We had those ups and downs. And finally figured it out, but it took a long time. And so the more you can do on that early and understand and test your execution, because like I said, it's easy to say you could do that. I'm a big fan of the one-page strategy. Lori Schultz also taught me that, showed me hers. We put that down. Bruce, an aligned exec team too, like you said, is so critical. But once you can set those things, that's fairly straightforward. Of course, you can have good debate, etc., but it's the execution side that's tricky, learning and iterating.
I love what you said one time, Kristine, about the support group for CEOs who have had failures.
Yeah, I had an executive tell me that once, and and it was so true. But I have to say, I finally learned and just have this amazing sales leader that was taking the company to the next level, just super smart and into the numbers and great with people, good on systems and process, awesome in front of customers. But once you find that, you're like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like.
I couldn't agree. There's a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, which is like the Bible for this, right? Where you think the sales leader you need is not the sales leader you actually need. And it changes depending on the stage of the company that you're in as well. But having someone who is both able to rally the folks and lead and execute on that strategy, but also understands the metrics and how to speak in front of the board and how to build confidence in process that's being followed. And I mean, sales is like you start out and everybody's kind of all over, and then you have territories, and then it becomes more specific. It's one of those things that as it evolves, it becomes an interesting challenge. And one of the reasons I went from being CTO to CPO was because I really wanted to partner with our CRO, Pascal, at Galvanize, and understand that side of the business more, and I came away with a huge amount of appreciation for the challenges in sales and marketing.
A good HR people leader partnering with your revenue, I think that is such a smart strategy, because you need the people leader to understand what's required from a growth modeling on sales, and then extra teams like BDR team, marketing, you can look at it more of a percent of revenue benchmark and a sales and marketing total spend benchmark in terms of what you put. But for our customers, because we sold to CMOs, it was the concept of return on intent, right? Why were you putting those dollars to work in the first place? What was your original plan and goal? And then how do you measure whether it was new markets or scaling the net new sales team or selling in new use cases, Jared, like you were saying for your team. So there's different strategies, but all of that too requires a good partner on a people leader, because if there's no sense of just what it's going to take to scale that and understanding the math and the model behind it, in addition to, of course, all the people side to that too, of course, the culture, the traits, etc. I just think your exec team is going to be flying a little bit blind in terms of what's needed to scale. So.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. And I think about like people leaders coming from the business into that role. It's not common. I wasn't a common. I'm realizing I was more unique than I thought. But that actually is something as well, where as long as you have a strong process and capable HR team, you can bring in a leader perhaps who's not traditionally from the HR practice.
Totally. I think that's a really unique solution and just really great perspective in the business about how it operates to scale. And then I think it's great.
Well, once again, Lori Schultz, culture was huge at Galvanize, and she didn't, her job when she came in and she stepped in as a CEO to help grow the business from taking over from a founder. And her job, she said her first job was to first break all the rules. And sometimes you have to do that to unlock the next phase of growth. Well, 45 minutes goes by just like that. So Jared, I want to sort of shift tracks a little bit to lessons learned. So like what were some of the like misfires, things where along the way in terms of your growth strategy, your product strategy, where did things kind of go awry, and what did you learn from that? I'm super curious to get your perspective.
Yeah, I could probably just use the previous conversation as a pivot point. So, growth and execution doesn't just apply to sales. Certainly, there's nothing more frustrating than throwing more people onto a dev team or a product team, and you start going slower. And that can happen. So, there's, I think what's common in a lot of companies is that the sales strategy kind of dictates how the product team gets shaped. And it's around certain markets or those of you who have maybe heard of Conway's Law, eventually, as you shape your organization, your product behind the scenes in the code base and stuff starts to emulate that. And that could be not good for you, where you're creating massive amounts of tech debt and challenging dependencies within the code base that makes adding new capabilities really difficult. And you get to a point where what used to take a couple of days for somebody to do is taking a couple of weeks. And so I think that would be one big one to be aware of is decoupling the shape of the product team from the way that you show up in the business, in the market. So the way that you sell, maybe that your user personas that you're targeting, those two things can be different as long as it's clear how the product translates. There's some kind of translation layer to the sales team and how that gets shown. And then I guess the other thing is for anybody that's been in the smaller company that's hit that critical number, the Dunbar's number of 150, we're at about 120 on the product team right now. And we definitely, especially in this distributed world where everybody's on Zoom, have found that what people used to be able to do, just kind of sitting in 3 or 4 tables and shouting over the desk to the person next to them, hey, what did you do when this happened? That doesn't really work anymore. The code base has grown, the feature set has grown, the types of markets that we're serving has grown, and everybody can't know everything about everything. And so you really need to start to slice your group in a way where you go from generalists to specialists, so that those specialists can really become experts in the thing that they're responsible for. And you can, through that, keep that intimate team collaboration and team culture that you had in that startup world. So you can kind of emulate that early startup feel as you grow, if you can build these little groups or teams of teams that are focused in specific business areas.
Yeah, I mean, you and I could talk about Conway's Law for like 3 hours and totally nerd out right now, because this is an area for me where like your communication structure defines your team structure, defines what you actually produce in the market. And that's not just in product, but in anywhere in your company. How you design your org design and how people communicate ultimately is what's going to be reflected in market. That's a 4-hour session just on its own. Bruce, I'm curious, like for you, like what were some of the, just along the way, things that kind of went sideways and you learned a lot from it? And just for the audience as well, if you have a question, now's a great time to drop it in the chat. I'm going to really try to leave a few minutes for answering questions because there might be something that came up earlier that you really want to get more in depth. So go ahead and drop it in the chat now. If not, we'll just continue on, but wanted to remind everybody. But Bruce, over to you.
Right. I think everyone has had a bunch of this, and I think the one that stands out for me is really the execution of our BD and go-to-market in the earlier days. In our phase 2 of the strategic growth, which is proving the revenue, I think we were kind of coming out of that initial build phase, and our product was still in the beta stage going out to the market. So we have had a really good strategy around using our consulting tech-enabled services team to go out there and really engage our customer and ears to the ground. So then we were bringing back a lot of the learnings in the trenches, so to speak, back to the command center. However, then when we kind of rebuilt that and then push it back out to the general market, there is a strategic time lag where our composition of our sales group was still kind of geared towards the phase one approach, which is more, relationship, network, rather than going out there in a way that is more based on science and value and data and dashboards and scalability. So, looking back now, if I were able to, do that, I think would have shortened about 8 to 10 months of our experimentation, so to speak, if we were able to, execute that better. By that, what I mean is in a more tactical level, the right BD outbounds and training for our sales team, right? And because there's a strategic lag where those new features that's coming back and new markets and verticals that we're going after in our new offering, we just kind of quickly went, still in that early stage mentality, kind of go, all right, salespeople, go out there and start selling this thing. And they're not really well equipped and trained on those new things. And then secondly, our kind of mentality around, hey, through the networks, through the partnerships, through building relationship, rather than focus on the value that we're bringing into our partners, our clients' organizations, and demonstrating that, that became a bottleneck to our scalability, because then it became, building relationships rather than building value, right? So I think if we realized that a little bit earlier, we would have been a little bit further ahead, faster.
Great. Yeah. No, that really lands. And, as I'm looking at some of the audience questions, there's a question about the fact that we're right now facing into coming tougher times. It's going to be harder to raise money. It's going to be, we're looking at potentially a big recession. And a lot of folks, perhaps over the last 10, 12 years, haven't had to deal with something like this. And so this is new territory for a lot of people. Kristine, I'm curious, like, you've always focused on profitable growth. I know that's something that's been a core discipline that becomes even more important right now because investors are going to be looking for, or even just your own employees are going to be looking for stability through troubling times like this. What sort of stands out for you in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a unique group here in that we've all had the orientation of smart growth, I call it, and not growth at all costs and burning a whole bunch of VC money and having to catch up to your valuation. You always have to catch up to your valuation, but it's a matter of how you do that and go forward. But yeah, I mean, I just always had that bent as a CEO and founder, even when it was not in fashion and it was growth at all costs. And I would meet VCs where that was all they wanted to see. And I just knew I didn't want to run a business like that. And you definitely go against the grain with that. What's nice about that, and I've seen a couple of these cycles over the years with Allocadia, what's nice about that is that you're in control of your own destiny. And for us, it did allow us to do that big last step on growth and scale, or this next step, I should say, with a PE buyer, because they do look at the stats that show that you have a healthy business, that you know how to grow without deep investment, because then they go, oh, okay, so we can choose to put investment in and more money to actually scale the business further. But they understand the mechanics to running a healthy business. So it becomes all about sort of choice for businesses that then essentially own the business and become the owners. And, yes, we sold Allocadia, valuations were quite high, tons of PE money out there, which was fantastic for that step. Valuations are coming down. I think there's still going to be, there's still a lot of PE money out there to put to work. So if anyone on the phone is considering raising, I still think it's a good time. You shouldn't expect the multiples that you would have seen last year. And perhaps LPs in these funds won't be putting, all their money to work, let's call it, with these VCs and PE. But I still think there's a lot to be put to work, because there's some underlying sort of health in growth in tech, even though markets are coming down, still growing. So that's my point of view. There's lots of opinions on this, and it's really about predicting the future, but that's my point of view.
Yeah, that's where I'm at Fresh Founders. We're focused on the early stage companies, and that's where I'm spending all my time right now, is in helping advise companies in early stage financing, dealing with changes in the dynamics of like what kind of terms investors are asking for now. Multiples, valuations have changed. There's a lot of really good material out there. I dropped a link in the chat for a startup profitability calculator. It shows you like at what you're growing and when you'll be profitable. I think it's a neat little tool. It's not the whole story, but it's something worth checking out. Jared, from your perspective, like how is the sort of current market conditions, affecting how you're thinking about things at Jane right now?
I don't think we're nervous at this point. I think we're just sitting back and seeing what's happening. We're serving the healthcare industry, which, positive or negative, people are going to need, even if there is a recession. So, but I'd say just my general sense here is this is a good time to look at efficiencies. What we were talking about is just throwing more people at a problem, right? And sometimes when you're kind of re-looking at the processes you have in place, or maybe too much process that you have in place, and ways that you can get more from your teams, not at the detriment of burning them out, but at the, how do you unlock the potential? And these are all brilliant people, I'm assuming, that you've hired, and there's a genius in all of them. Like, how do we unlock that and make sure that the machine isn't in the way of that? And I think a time like this is a great time to revisit that and see how can we do more with less.